Yo, how's it going everybody? My name is Artorigold and today we are doing a deck profile for Yamato. This is my personal pick for what I think is going to be the best anti-meta deck in this current format. And the reasoning is pretty simple. Zoro's leader ability, 1 Dawn, allows him to buff everything by 1k. Yamato's leader ability completely negates that. And, as we saw with the Whitebeard nerfs, even though Whitebeard is still kinda strong, Zoro way more popular. And in my opinion, I think Yamato is the perfect answer. It basically just cancels out Zoro's leader ability, and it makes them have to overextend and apply way more Dawn than they want to, meaning they can't develop the board as much, and meaning that they can't use their rush cards as effectively as they want to. In my opinion, I think Yamato is criminally underrated, even though she is not able to use some of the Big Mom cards, such as the 10 cost Big Mom, she still remains being a very, very good deck. And I backed it up with some facts. As you can see here, I have several different matchups and screenshots of all of the games that I played. My record was 8-3 with this version, the Yamato Peak version 10 of the deck. And I gotta be honest, I struggled at the beginning with this deck. It was pretty difficult to put it together. But as I played the deck more and more and more, and I tinkered around with what I wanted to put in there, it just worked better and better. And to be honest with you, it's all thanks to the leader effect. It comes in way more clutch than you would even realize. There are many times where the enemy would be playing a deck such as Katakuri, and he would drop the 10 cost Big Mom on me. Then he would try to attack my leader, and it just wouldn't work. Why? Well, because when you use 10 Dawn, you can't apply a Dawn to your leader to attack for 6. So there would be plenty of these attacks that would just do nothing to me, and then I would just be able to go for game the next turn because I would have things like Cracker on the field, and I would just be able to have the 4 cost Katakuri Rush and kill him that way. Like, there are just so many ways you can play this deck where it's just the true underdog deck. You're always behind the enemy in life state, but that's what you want. It's insane, actually. It really is. So let's go ahead and talk about the deck. So where does Yamato come from? Because she's not out yet. Well, she comes in Structure Deck 09, which is about a week away. I believe it's like August 11th or something like that, and you get a bunch of new cards. We are only running 2 of the cards from the Structure Deck. We are running the big new beefy vanilla 5 cost 7k, pretty standard stat line, but it ends up being super clutch. As you know, 7k attacks are king in this game. It's the perfect amount to just get away from a 2k counter and make them use 2 cards instead of 1 in order to save themselves. It's just fantastic. And then the other one is a new event card. The Arrow event is extremely good. Basically, it's minus 3k power on a character. Essentially, it's better guard point, because when you have leaders like Rob Lucci and Kid who can attack twice, well, the 3k thing, it sticks to them. So they have a double attack with minus 3k, meaning it's so much easier for you to dodge lethal because you also have that minus 3k while your leader is at 6. In other words, it's kind of like a mini Hell's Judgment. But that's not all. Its trigger effect is insanely good too. It has the exact same trigger as Ikkaku. You discard 2 cards and you gain a life. And you have 6 ways to do that. I mean, that's insane. Overall, the deck just has the same standard yellow package that every other yellow deck runs, minus maybe Shirahoshi. We don't really care for that. We don't really need too much card draw in this deck because you're taking that life aggressively and early on. All you really need is the Pudding and the Perospero, and then from there you can just use your 8 cost Katakuri on your own Pudding, so then you can use her again. And the only really spicy thing we got going on in this deck is we have Buzzcut and Thunderbolt. Now, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but the synergy here is you use Thunderbolt to aggressively clear the enemy's board, which gives you good tempo. Then you can play things like big beefy vanillas or Cracker, so when you're behind on life, you get the double attack and he becomes a 7k for only 1 Dawn. And then the Buzz Cut, it just works great because you're getting rid of your own life with Thunderbolt, so then you can just clear the board of anything that the red decks have. So let's quickly talk a little bit about the matchups here, because I do have quite a bit of info to show you guys my 8-3 win-loss record with the Yamato version 10. So as you can see, we're both at 0 life. Magellan, Very easy win. You just outvalue him. Thunderbolt hits all of his early game cards. I don't really want to go for the 5-cost Magellan because it puts me behind on curve, but I was able to aggressively clear all of the impelled down beasts such as the Banished Zebra and the Rhino with Thunderbolt and Buzzcut, and from there I just kind of stabilized with all of my board and just went for face, and I didn't even care when he was going for mine. Next match, I went for Zoro. Basically, I ignored his board and I just went for his life. The funny thing about Zoro players is that when they take life the first couple of times, unlike other players, they don't care. They think they have the early game aggression. They have more power than anybody else out there. So they take that life greedily because they want more cards to put on the board. But that ended up being a very bad move for him because I just kept going to his life and I just kept clearing his board with things like Buzzcut. And then from there, I was able to just go for game because he doesn't have any blockers and he doesn't really have much counter power either. Like the most he had was like Makino or something. In general, I just went face with this deck and I countered out of every single one of his attacks. And yeah, he never used any counters to try to get out of those attacks until it was way too late. And then when he had one Don open, which could have been a guard point, it's not going to save you from a huge swing from my cracker. So either way, Zoro, unexpectedly, very easy for you to deal with as Yamato. Next up was the craziest loss that I ever had. I lost against Film Sanji. Now, to be fair, I do think Film has a pretty big advantage against this deck. Basically, they are spamming the board pretty aggressively, and you don't really want to use things like Thunderbolt on a Brook or a Usopp, but you kind of have to. And one of the other downsides that I discovered is that if you are playing against a dual color leader, you are at a bit of a disadvantage because you're not able to use your 4-cost Katakuri Rush or your Buzzcut until you're at lower life. And that kind of sucks. It does really suck. So there's a couple of things at play here. But to be honest, I'm not really expecting to lose against the Sanji a second time. I feel like I was just caught off guard with the aggression and I played the match a little bit wrong. Either way, it was a really fun match and I'm not sad at all that I lost this. I do think Film is still pretty good. Next up is a win against Ace. I think Ace is pretty miserable to play against because he can use Flame Emperor, exactly killing all of your bigger cards such as Katakuri or the 7-cost Big Mom. However, I was able to sustain it because I was able to use my 8-cost Katakuri on my own pudding. So I just kept putting my pudding back on top of my life, and I was able to just keep putting the aggression out there because the big issue with Flame Emperor is that he can't develop the board. Sure, maybe he can put an Ezo down, but that's about it. Either way, this deck doesn't struggle too much to counter out of the Flame Emperor attacks. It only puts him up by plus 3k, and I'm already at 6k. Eventually, he does an 8k swing every time, and I can just counter out of it with my 1 Dawn event. As you can see here, the arrow, it basically just counters out of Flame Emperor very easily and very efficiently. Oh yeah, he also had 3 Flame Emperors, but I was able to survive still. It was a really crazy game. Next up, I had a Katakuri game. Now, the Katakuri game was pretty easy to get out of because he got very cocky, and I had no problem just trashing my own life. And he did the same thing when I dropped my own 7-cost Big Mom, and that just worked in my favor. But one of the things about this matchup is when he swings for 7k with Katakuri, while that is very good most of the time, I just take the hit. I'm not worried about that at all. I like getting my life lower. So taking those 7k swings from not just Katakuri, but other decks like Doflamingo, it actually just helps you get to your win condition even easier. And then one of the things I did after that is after I took those 7k swings, I was able to develop Cracker, and then I just swung for double attack for about 9k on him on the next turn, and I was just able to do really aggressive plays like that. And because he kept trashing his own life from my 7-cost Big Mom effect, it just put him in a really easy lethal spot for me to just keep swinging extremely big every single turn. And one of the other bigger issues with the Katakuri deck compared to the Yamato deck is they not only run like the Katakuri 8-cost and the 7-cost Big Mom, they also do the 10-cost Big Mom, which means they generally don't have as much counter power. So these attacks they're much easier to land against them. Next up, we have another win against a structure deck Big Mom. This one was very close, but one of the biggest reasons why I was able to win is because when he uses a 10 cost Big Mom, he wastes all of his Dawn, meaning all he can do with his leader is nothing, because he swings for 5k into my 6k leader, so he's not able to get that extra card out of my hand. Basically, he does have the life effect on 10 cost Big Mom, and that was it. And so I just ignored him and I just kept going life. Because in general, what they want to do is play these 10 cost Big Moms into 10 cost Big Moms, but you can just apply more pressure by spamming the board with lower cost things and then having the Dawn left over for other counters such as Arrow or whatever. And yeah, you just kind of win that way because the 10 cost Big Mom is actually way too slow against this deck. Next up, we have a loss against a Luffy player. This was tragic. As you guys can kind of see here, as I was going for the win, his last life card was a Red Hawk trigger, and it hit my 8 cost Katakuri that was going to go for game because, yeah, he just had no other counters in his hand. I know that wasn't a counter, so that was just tragic. I think I played it pretty well. He had 3 different shanks on me. He had the minus 10k trigger on me. It was really unfortunate. I probably should have won that game, but I did lose it. That is one of my losses. Next up was Arlong. This was a stomp. I mean, this guy had no chance. I really don't know if the Arlong does very well against me because Buzz Cut was really, really good against all of his green cards that he kept putting on the field. And unlike the Sanji deck, he wasn't able to pop out a ton of extra 5k swingers. That's kind of the big issue with Arlong. You kind of need to get the Parasparrow on the field, the Smoothie, and things like that. And he didn't really get that. So yeah, I just kind of outvalued here. I was just able to play the slow game in order to get that win. Next up, we have Red Green Luffy. This was a stomp. I mean, this guy wasn't able to do anything. He had a very interesting deck that tried to use, like Brook and double attack with Brook. And then he had like Shanks and things like that. But it was pretty easy to get out of. I mean, the deck just isn't that good. I think Red Green Luffy is just kind of weak all the way around. Then next we have Rob Lucci. This was pretty devastating. His double attack basically got me very good, and I wasn't able to get the events that I really needed here. I think in general, I probably would have had a better time if he didn't have good triggers. I remember specifically he had 2 Shockwave triggers on me, which killed my Parasparrow and my 4-cost Katakuri. And then he had an Ice Age in his life that had a trigger, which also killed my Peckhams. So that also really sucked. I think I just win this game if I don't get hit by 3 triggers in a row. But, sometimes that's just the game. And then lastly, I played against Kinemon. This was pretty easy. I basically just used my 8-cost Katakuri on his Odin, and from there I was able to win the game. I mean, you could even use it on the 8-cost Kid as well. Kid is having a really tough time. Odin in general having a really tough time right now. 8-cost Katakuri really makes green have a really bad time. This was a pretty easy match though. At the beginning, it looks a little bit rough, but this deck has so many counters, you will survive as long as you play it pretty smart. And then you have the 4-cost Katakuri to rush and kind of get a bit more value back for yourself. Either way, this matchup gets really easy in the late game stages. It's only rough in the early game. Now, 8-3 is a pretty good record, and I think you guys could all agree. But for me personally, I actually wasn't satisfied with that. I don't think that 8-3, I don't think it was good enough. So what I wasn't telling you guys is that I actually have another Yamato deck, because I didn't quit playing this deck. I kept going. I have a version 11, 12, and 13. So what I'm about to show you guys is a 9-1 Yamato deck that I came up with because I was not satisfied with 8-3, and you never should be. So let's go ahead and load it in. What do we have different here? Well, we took the buzz cuts out. We added more vanillas, or rather a different variety of the vanilla. We have the 6k instead of Peckhams. And then we added more 2k counters, and we took a little bit of an arrow away, and instead we put it in a Kaku instead because I like this card a little bit more. And then we got rid of 1 Thunderbolt. Now, this deck has more tempo and more 2Ks. So one of the biggest issues that I have with Pudding is she's not able to grab Pudding. So I don't really like the fact that I can't grab this card. So I didn't include it in my first versions of the deck. But then I realized you know, you can get it off Parasparrow. It's not all that bad. I like having more 2k counters in this deck, so that's what we're going to do. So let's talk about the matchups for this set, because let me tell you, this was a way better version of the deck. First up, we have Blurple Crocodile. This was a really good win. I basically outvalued him with the 8-cost Katakuri, and I was able to keep using my pudding over and over again because I just kept putting pudding at the top of my life. Either way, it was extremely good because I could just keep searching more things like more 7-cost Big Moms or whatever. It's just such a good play against other decks that are slower because you do outvalue them eventually. Next up, we had a Katakuri win. This duel was pretty crazy. So as you guys can see here, I have a ton of cards. I could have countered out of a lot of hits. I just let it hit me so I could use the rush and just go for game right back at him. Next up is Trafalgar Law. This was by far what you would think would be the hardest matchup, but they just kept trashing their own life. I used 2 7-cost Big Moms. They trashed their own life, so I just kept attacking for game, and eventually we broke through. I didn't really care about any of these attacks that he had against me, because as you guys can see, I have a lot of counters in this deck, and I just countered out of it with my 6k leader, and I was able to win and just beat him before he beat me. Next up, we have another Katakuri player. Once again, they dropped the 10-cost Big Mom and try to attack me with their 5k swing, only to realize that doesn't work against me. So I live another extra turn and I'm able to just go straight for game. As you can see, the 6ks attacking for 7 is really a lot better than Pekoms in my opinion. So far, the evidence stands for itself. I really do think Yamato is way better than Katakuri. Game 5, we have a win against Ace. He just again kept trashing his own life with the 7-cost Big Mom, and so I just kept attacking him for game. I didn't even try to clear his board of the aces. I just kept swinging life and I just keep tanking these hits because it was much easier for me to 2k counter out of attacks than it was for him. It feels almost like I'm playing Whitebeard. I'm just going in and attacking them before they can do anything. And because they're trashing their own life, it's just helping me get to my win condition quicker than they can get to theirs. Next up is Doflamingo. I found this deck to be extremely easy. I didn't care about him swinging for 7 at all. It was basically just helping me out more than anything. And then all of my vanillas were able to clear his board. Whatever he put out with his leader effect, I could clear pretty easily. And then from there, maybe Thunderbolt a blocker or 2. I think he had like 2 Boa Hancocks on the field, but he only had 1 Dawn attached to one of them. So I just Thunderbolted that one, and then he got no value out of it. And I just kept putting pressure on him, and I was able to go for game. I believe he also trashed his own life. Oh, no, he did one of each. He trashed his own life at the beginning, but then I dropped another Big Mom, and he gave me that life. Which actually sucks. If they give you life, it's not what you want, because then you can't get your leader effect, so it's more difficult for you. I believe he didn't have a Mihawk either, right? No, in my notes here, he never had a Mihawk. He really needs a Mihawk in order to try to survive a game like this. Next up, Rob Lucci. He didn't have 2 Shockwaves in his life or a Ice Age in his life. It was very easy. I Thunderbolted all of his 4-cost Kuzons, and that gave me the win. And from there, I was just able to keep applying pressure, and I just ignored his 7k swings because it was easy to 2k counter out of the 7k swing. Next up, a win against Blurple Kaido. He really didn't stand a chance, to be honest. I don't think his deck was that good. It had a couple of neat little things in there, but just like with Doflamingo, I can just Thunderbolt the Boa Hancock and just kind of keep applying pressure, and the deck is just a bit too slow, so I was able to win. Next up, the only loss that I had, which was an insanely god tier trigger on Katakuri. He had the Ikaku trigger on life as I was about to go for game with Yamato, and I believe something else. He just had the most insane trigger of all. He just had that Ikaku trigger, so he got that other life by discarding 2 cards, and I lost only because of that. Normally I win those every single time, but that's also why we run 4 Ikakus, because we really like that trigger. It is very good. Then lastly, for the final game, we have the structured deck Black Luffy. Not a terrible deck. It actually was very annoying. I think black in general is the most difficult matchup for you because, as you can see, Thunderbolt cannot hit the Borsalino or the Chop Papa blockers. They don't die. So it is kind of a dead card for you. Thunderbolt is not good in this matchup at all. Overall, 9-1, I'm much happier with the way this deck is now. I think the worst time you're going to have, like I said, is things that are unkillable by Thunderbolt. That will probably be the biggest annoyance for you. But overall, I like this version of the deck way more than the other version. However, I am also going to say I am still cooking. I am not done with this deck until I make it a 10-0 perfect win record. We have a lot to improve on here. I think it's almost close, but it's just not quite how I want it to be. But I hope you guys go out there, you try the deck out, you enjoy it, you win with it. So anyways, guys, that's it for this video. If you have any questions or any thoughts about the deck, please let me know, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.